A lot of mystery still surrounds FNAF 2, or at least mystery for the motive behind the things that happened. For a lot of fans, FNAF 2 was the kicking off point for the deep and intense lore of this franchise, presenting death minigames like Save Them and Give Gifts, Give Life, and for the most part, we know what these events are. Give Gifts, Give Life seems to be the marionette assisting the missing child incident victims in possessing the animatronics. Give Cake to the Children seems to be William Afton killing Charlotte Emily, and Save Them seems to be another batch of children murdered at a Freddy's location, this time the FNAF 2 one. But here's the thing, we know what these events are, but the why is still a mystery to us, especially with something like Save Them, or what fans have been calling the Dead Child Incident, or DCI. All this time and we're still not 100% sure on how they died, why they died, and if their spirits possessed anything. And I think it's high time that somebody definitively solved with conclusive evidence what those answers are. Unfortunately, I don't know who that could be, so you're stuck with me giving my best guess. Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. By the way, I'm using the same microphone, but I have a new interface which has a better preamp, so I had to redo all my audio settings, so if the audio sounds much better or much worse than it used to, let me know. I'm trying to readjust everything. Hopefully it should theoretically be better, but probably 80% of you won't notice because I'm just really picky about this shit. FNAF 2 itself is centered around the shortest ever open Freddy's location. We know from the newspaper at the end of the game that it was only open for a few short weeks in 1987. Trying to move past the bad PR of the missing child incident, this new Freddy Fazbear's toted additional security with intensive measures. The new toy animatronics literally had a criminal database that they could scan people's faces and compare with. Everything about this restaurant seemed like it was supposed to be the safest place your children could be, but literally within like a month that proved to be not true. The new animatronics would act strangely with adults staring at them for long periods of time. Eventually, one of the animatronics attacked what seems to be an employee, severing their frontal lobe. And like I mentioned earlier, 5 kids end up getting killed and their bodies are strewn about the restaurant. We also know that someone used a spare yellow suit in the back and all the animatronics started going crazy. By the end of it, it shut down and the toys are scrapped. But it's mentioned that the original animatronics are kept in the hopes that they can reopen sometime in the future. So we know all of this, but like, we still don't know why any of that bad stuff happened. I think the Dead Child incident is the linchpin to this entire issue. If we can figure out why a bunch of kids died at the FNAF 2 location, then that context might help us answer a lot of the other questions we have about this situation. But the Dead Child incident is one of the weirdest parts of the lore for a lot of fans of this franchise. So much so that most fans just kind of gloss over. The spirits don't seem to go anywhere unless you believe that they're possessing the toys, but that presents a whole nother slew of issues. After all, the toys are acting strangely on day 1, and it seems like the children were killed near the end of the week. But even if they did end up in the toys, we're not sure what happens to them after that, unless you believe that the FNAF 2 kids are what end up in Molten Freddy, but circumstantial evidence from FNAF 6 goes against that. It's just a whole confusing mess. So something that might help us get any more information is figuring out the motive, the why. Why did these children die? Well, let's go down our possible reasons list, starting with the animatronics themselves. We know that from the game itself and what Phone Guy tells us, the animatronics are getting more and more aggressive and unstable, and that there was supposed to be one last private party at the end of the week, before the place shuts down for the foreseeable future. So is it possible that these animatronics are so messed up that by the end of the week, during that private party, they just start flipping out and go on a rampage, killing anything that's too close? Ultimately, while possible, that seems unlikely. Granted, we have very little information on who these dead people are, and they might be adults, but it seems more likely that we're dealing with more dead children. And if they are children, that doesn't make much sense. The game states several times that the animatronics act fine around children. It's adults that they are standoffish and strange towards. Not to mention, in the Save Them minigame, while the dead children are strewn about the restaurant nearby animatronics, the animatronics don't seem to be attacking the children. They seem to not actually be interacting with those children at all. The only one that's moving outside of the puppet and withered Freddy is Mangle, who's just kind of wandering around aimlessly. And the marionette and Freddy moving in and of itself goes against this idea. If the animatronics are the ones attacking the children, why did the marionette try to get withered Freddy, another animatronic, to help save them? And another reason on top of all this is one of the endings of this minigame. If you follow the marionette correctly, eventually you'll encounter William Afton, who rushes you, and I guess like suplexes an animatronic. I don't know what he does to take down withered Freddy, but he rushes you and the screen goes black, so he did something, and then we see the words, "You can't." Man, the sound of dripping water is going to drive me crazy. It's like that one creepypasta. I need something to block out the noise of this cave. Huh, maybe this will help. Today's video is sponsored by Raycon. With the holidays coming up, do you want a Cyber Monday deal you'll use every day? Raycon's everyday earbuds. Because even though Raycon's quality rivals some of the big names in premium audio, Raycons start at just half the cost of the other guys. So they're already an incredible deal before you factor in their Cyber Monday offer of up to 30% off site-wide. Let me break it down for you. And now let me explain why I love these earbuds. More than anything, 3 words. Active noise cancellation. I can walk down the sidewalk or in a big cave, and after putting these on, I get lost in my music. I've also been loving these cool protective case covers. First of all, check out this design. It not only complements the earbuds color perfectly, and I love space things, but they even support wireless charging through the case. So I don't even have to take the case off to get 90 minutes of battery life with 10 minutes of charging. It's time to save big for Cyber Monday. Go to buyraycon.com/rytoast today to get up to 30% off site-wide. That's right, you'll get 30% off everything on Raycon's website when you go to buyraycon.com/rytoast. Thanks again to Raycon for sponsoring today's video. Oh, this cave trek just got more enjoyable. Okay, so simple as. William Afton killed the children at the dead child incident, which is why when we were trying to save them, he says you can't. But then again, why does he do this? Well, maybe he needed more fodder for his experiments. Now, this goes into possible motives for the missing child incident, which we similarly don't have clear or at least confirmed motivations for. And I'm going to say this right at the top, because I can hear some of you already being annoying. Arguing about what motive William Afton had to kill children in this franchise is not saying that there is any reasonable justification for doing what William did. Obviously, there is no reasonable or moral justification for what William Afton did, but even the most sick and twisted villains out there have an internal morality. In their own minds, what they are doing makes sense for their reason. So when we're trying to find a motive for William Afton, we're trying to find his reasoning. Why does he do this? Sure, he could just be killing people to kill people, but he's a crazy scientist. Clearly, there's likely going to be a motivation behind his actions. So if you subscribe to the belief that he did the missing child incident in order to see if possession was something that is possible, then this can start to make sense a little bit, and I'm partial to this theory. The idea that maybe after the bite of 83, he saw Golden Freddy moving in some strange ways. So to try to replicate that, he kills children and puts them in animatronic suits to see if he can induce a possession. So maybe that didn't work and he's trying it again at the FNAF 2 location. But then, if that's the case, why is he doing it out in the open? And why is he leaving the bodies strewn about? Wouldn't it make more sense to continue to stuff the bodies into suits? And it's not like they wouldn't fit. Yes, the toys are a little smaller, but they're still big enough to fit a child in their chest cavity. And he was so secretive and careful with the missing child incident, it seems strange that he's suddenly flippant and out in the open with the dead child incident, so much so that it closes the restaurant he opened to do this experiment. Well, to be fair, we don't know that he opened this restaurant, and that seems unlikely. A lot of fans think that the FNAF 2 location was opened by Henry. If that's the case, then William Afton doing this to spite Henry and close the location is possible. We know that at this point it's likely William Afton hates Henry Emily and partially blames him for the death of the crying child. Not to say he cares about his children, but it's still an annoyance to him. So it's possible that William Afton was trying to prove that no matter what Henry tries, he cannot get away from William Afton. He will be there to ruin whatever he wants to try to do. But that's also not without its issues, because I don't think Henry Emily owns the FNAF 2 location. When things start going really bad, Phone Guy tells us that they're trying to get into contact with the original restaurant's owner, Fredbear's Family Diner, but they can't even seem to get a hold of him, and it seemed like he could barely remember the name of the restaurant. So it seems like he's not familiar with Henry Emily at all, which leaves us with 2 options. Either Henry Emily is not the owner of the FNAF 2 location, or he's using some weird pseudonym, which is pretty hard to do, legally speaking, when you're running a business. It's one thing to get hired for a week under a fake name, but to own and operate a restaurant is a lot trickier. Not to mention, if Charlotte Emily is dead at this point, why is he even reopening another Freddy's? He's got no skin in the game anymore. It doesn't make sense for William to open a restaurant just to get it closed, and it doesn't make sense for Henry to open this restaurant in the first place. At this point, I don't even think either of them owned the FNAF 2 location. Neither William nor Henry owned FNAF 2.
She can take song requests. She can even dispense ice cream.
With all due respect, those aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton.
One of the hottest debates in the fandom right now is who is the current CEO of Fazbear Entertainment, at least up until about halfway through Security Breach, where it seems that Glitchtrap begins taking over the online communication and posing as this digital CEO. Who would possibly own and operate this doomed brand in the modern era? Well, that's a great debate to have, especially since in Security Breach, as pointed out by several other theorists, it's an LLC. But at this early in the franchise, it's incorporated. It's a separate business. We can see this on the FNAF 6 paperwork, and we can see it in other trademarks throughout the game. As far as I'm aware, all of this debate has been under the assumption that Fazbear Entertainment Incorporated is a private company with sole or co-ownership. But what if it isn't? What if Fazbear Entertainment Incorporated is a publicly traded business, beholden to shareholders? Quick Business 101 for those who don't know or don't live in the US and don't have to listen to US laws about this. Maybe it's the same laws in other countries, I don't know, I'm American, I barely know how to do research for American business laws. Regardless, in the US, where FNAF is located, there are two major categories of companies, public and private, and a lot of other types of businesses can fall under either category. But the main difference of public and private, and the pertinent idea for this video, is that a private company is completely owned by a single person or select group of people. They have proprietorship of that company, whereas ownership of a public company is derived heavily by its stocks. Anyone can buy stocks of a public company so long as you can afford said stock. And ownership of the publicly traded company is made up of what is called shareholders, the group of people that own the majority of the stocks of said company. If I buy 1% of Apple stocks, which I do not have the money for, but if I did, then technically I own 1% of Apple. But even if I own that 1%, they don't really gotta listen to me. And legally, as far as I'm aware, you don't have to actually listen to your shareholders. They just reserve the right to stop funding your company. Essentially, and forgive me if I'm getting some of this incorrect, feel free to correct me in the comments below. I'm an English major. This was all new to me and I had to do a lot of research just for this one aspect of the theory. I learned how to write an essay. I don't know how to do any of this. According to the research I did to understand this, essentially if some big billionaire buys up 60% of my company's stocks, I can use the funds they've allocated into that stock to fund the company and make it bigger and better. It's similar to investing money into a company to help it succeed. But the reason that that big billionaire now has some control over me isn't like a legal contract. I don't have to do what he says. The thing is though, he doesn't have to fund my company. If I piss him off too much, he can just leave, sell his stocks, and be gone. And suddenly I don't have all that investment that he put into the company. I'm out of money now. So I really want to do what this guy wants me to do. And that's where shareholders have control over a company. I'm pretty sure. Again, I did like a week of research for this. And if you want to reward that effort, you should drop a subscribe. If you like more thorough investigations on horror games, I do a lot of FNAF, but I'm trying to do not just FNAF moving forward. So back to FNAF. The only time I could find that ownership is directly mentioned in this franchise is that FNAF 2 quote, when they say they're going to try to track down the owner of the original restaurant. And what if that's the key here? There have been a lot of hints toward this throughout the entire franchise, and we've just been missing it. The FNAF 1 newspaper mentions seeking out a buyer. The FNAF 2 newspaper mentioning that they're keeping the original animatronics to eventually reopen down the line. If Fazbear's has been a publicly traded company, depending on how they filed for bankruptcy, all of this suddenly makes much more sense. And it comes down to business law. Game theory actually talked about ownership in the past, with the fact that the modern Fazbear games showcase that it's Fredbear's Entertainment LLC now, which means that in some way, Scott is definitely paying attention to the types of business law being used in this franchise. So let's do a very quick Freddy Fazbear's timeline to figure out what is going on at FNAF 2 and why. But not about William or Henry or any of those schmucks, about the business side of the company. I mean, we'll mention Henry and William along the way, but we're focusing on the business side of things. So I present to you the business timeline of Five Nights at Freddy's. Sometime in the late 70s or early 80s, William and Henry establish and own the private company Fredbear's Family Diner to great success. They want funding to create bigger and better things and expand the brand to more people, but they can't afford it with the money they're getting just from Fredbear's alone. They need funding. So they establish a separate business entity, Fazbear Entertainment. This is why the name is different from Fredbear to Freddy Fazbear. Separate business entities. It's a win-win scenario. Either this new venture is successful and they're wealthy beyond their wildest dreams, or at the worst case scenario, it goes fully under, Fredbear's Family Diner is fine. That is a separate business entity. Fazbear Entertainment goes under, we wash our hands and declare Chapter 7 bankruptcy, selling all of those assets back to the market. I should go into this as well because this is incredibly important for this theory, surprisingly. There's two main types of bankruptcy you can declare in the US as a business. There are more types, but the two main ones that are important for today's video are Chapter 7 bankruptcy and Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Chapter 7 bankruptcy is essentially a sell-all process, where whoever is in debt sells all of their non-exempt assets from the company to use that money to pay back who they're in debt to, and typically the remaining amount is forgiven. It's basically, we fucked up, here's everything we did, and that's as much cash as we can give you back, see you never. Chapter 11 is more often used in businesses where there's an attempt to continue the business after bankruptcy. There's an agreement made between all of the debtors and debtees. Essentially, the people who owe the money go, hey, here's all the stuff you've invested into the company and all of the assets we bought with the money you gave us. You can hold on to that, we'll reorganize the company, and maybe we can reach a new agreement later down the line. It's a way to maintain a business through a bankruptcy. Hi, this is VoiceOver Riley. It's probably going to sound a little better. Anyway, I was editing this and I just realized, according to uscourts.gov, a Chapter 11 bankruptcy is frequently referred to as a reorganization bankruptcy. This is important because the FNAF 2 newspaper, and I just noticed this in editing, literally says the original characters are being kept in hopes of a possible reorganization of the company. This newspaper is literally directly saying they're doing a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, meaning Scott was thinking about things like this all the way back then. Either that or this is a crazy coincidence. It's incredibly important for this theory, I promise, and it'll be important later. Eventually, William and Henry find enough investors and funding for first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza to open, and Freddy's and the gang are legally owned by the major shareholders of the company, the investors putting the most money in, not being legally owned by William or Henry. They only retain ownership of Fredbear's Family Diner and its characters, the separate business entity. Then the Bite of 83 happens, and eventually Fredbear's Family Diner is shut down because of it. At this point, no way would the shareholders want the public image of Fazbear Entertainment Incorporated to be besmirched by declaring ownership of the company to either of the businessmen who just had a public children's death happen in the middle of their restaurant. Sure, they can continue to be the minds behind the creation of these animatronics and the engineers, but they are not touching a leadership role of Fazbear Entertainment. William then begins creating a separate business venture, Circus Baby's Pizza World, and through it needs to create a new business entity, Afton Robotics, again seeking out funding. It's my belief that William Afton, after seeing the Bite of 83, either because he noticed Fredbear acting strange or just wanted to experiment with the concept of life, wants to recreate that bite with the Funtime animatronics. He seeks out additional shareholders for that new business venture, and this is where we get that sister location cutscene from. It was an application to the shareholders to show the proof of concept of Circus Baby, but of course that restaurant goes under before it ever happens. Now there's just a roster of Funtime animatronics that William is stuck with, because this business entity was attached to his name, Afton Robotics. He's the proprietor. At this point in the timeline, Henry either disappears not to be heard from again, or William Afton pins the next thing he does on Henry to get Henry arrested. Depends on what you believe. But William Afton, still wanting to experiment with possession, does the missing child incident to see if anything would happen. It's not his business anymore, so it really doesn't matter if it gets shut down. Just put the dead children in the animatronics and see if they possess them. But alas, William doesn't notice any possession, and within a year, that place shuts down. But something worse happens. Since Fazbear Entertainment Incorporated was set up as a separate business entity owned majorly by the shareholders, when Freddy Fazbear Pizza goes under, if those shareholders decided on a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, William Afton would no longer retain ownership to any of the assets of the company. Those are now owned by the investors while they reorganize the business trying to move forward. To put it simply, William Afton lost access to his experiments. The Freddy's animatronics, holding children's bodies, are held securely away from them. He needs to study them to see if any kind of possession will work, but he can't get any access to them without an active Freddy's location. So after a year or so, he approaches these shareholders with a grand idea for a new Freddy's that can get them out of bankruptcy and be safer than ever before. William promises a criminal database scanning on all of the animatronics, state-of-the-art security. Nothing could ever go wrong at this place, and to sweeten the deal, He just happens to have a spare balloon boy from Circus Baby's Pizza World, never before seen by the public. They could even throw that in as a brand new animatronic. The shareholders agree, and the new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is opened. Finally, William Afton can observe and experiment on those older animatronics again, occasionally taking pieces of them and attaching them to the toys to see if they can get any reaction. But are they possessed? He needs to see if they'll act strangely. But after some time, they're still not reacting, and William Afton grows desperate, knowing if this restaurant shuts down again, he will once again lose access to these observations. Something has to make them move. If they're possessed, something needs to trigger a reaction. Why not remind them how they got there? As a Hail Mary to absorb any sort of motion, William puts on the old Spring Bonnie suit that he killed them in and kills a new roster of children right in front of them. That got a reaction. As he's doing this, the marionette goes off its track to get the old Freddy animatronic for help. Save them, it begs. And William Afton sees the marionette and that old Freddy animatronic marching toward him. And in that moment, he got everything he's ever wanted. Undeniable proof that possession exists and can be manipulated. But it's not without its consequences. The animatronics have been driven mad at this point, and by the time of the last private party of the FNAF 2 location, they're too erratic. One of them even attacking an employee, severing his frontal lobe. The Freddy's location closes down, and once again, the animatronics are kept for safekeeping. But the toys are scrapped. They don't want to be associated with William's new creations, which is fine by William. Those toys have several parts of the old original animatronics, and he can start to get to work. This even explains Follow Me if it's true, because the next time a Freddy's location opens and closes, William Afton knows that those animatronics will get locked away if left for too long. So in that moment, he's desperate enough to rush in and try to disassemble them himself before they're taken away. I think this is a perfectly rational explanation for the DCI, the Bite of 87, Follow Me, and the intro for Sister Location. And I think it slots in perfectly for the timeline of William and Henry. I'm so confident about this, but what do you think? Do you think the DCI was a way to try and provoke a reaction from the animatronics in the little time that William had access to them? Or am I looking way too much into the legal nuances of fake businesses? Well, I'm definitely doing that, but is the theory likely anyway? In the meantime, last week I put out a review on the new Mario Party that just came out. It's a really good game, and I think it's a pretty good video. You can watch that on the second channel right here. If you want your fan art featured on the channel, make sure to share it with #ToastArt. A huge thank you to the best channel members, the Dough Risers, and until next time, as always, stay toasty, slices.